The sun had barely risen over the Nevada desert, casting a fiery orange glow over the tarmac. Captain Emily "Hawk" Daniels taxied her A-10 Warthog across the base, its engines growling like an old predator awakening after years of silence. The morning air vibrated with the roar of F-16 streaking overhead, their sleek, modern frames glinting in the sunlight. Emily's Warthog was different, heavier, scarred, battle-worn. Its fuselage bore dents, faded paint, and reminders of every mission it had survived. Some of the younger pilots even whispered it looked more like a museum exhibit than a weapon of war. Emily ignored them. She had learned early that respect was earned in the air, not on the ground. As she climbed into the cockpit, the smell of oil, leather, and metal reminded her of countless missions of friends lost, of narrow escapes that would haunt her forever. Every switch, lever, and gauge felt like an old friend beneath her fingers, familiar and trusted. The tail number, AF8001, gleamed faintly in the sun. It wasn't just a number. It was a legacy, a story of missions classified and remembered only by those who had flown before her. Nearby, a group of F-16 pilots leaned casually against their sleek jets, their faces painted with the arrogance of youth. "Is that seriously an A-10?" one muttered, trying not to laugh. "Looks like it came straight out of the Cold War." Lieutenant Ryan Jet Maxwell, barely 25, stepped closer, smirking. "Hope that thing doesn't fall apart before takeoff," he said loud enough for Emily to hear. The other pilots chuckled. Emily didn't respond. She knew words meant little compared to what happened once you left the ground. She flicked switches, ran diagnostics, and listened as the engines roared to life. The sound wasn't sleek or modern like the F-16's, but it was raw and powerful, a growl that promised destruction and survival in equal measure. Her HUD flickered, casting a faint green glow across her determined face. Every sensor was operational, every system checked. She was ready. As the F-16s lined up behind her for formation training, Emily's Warthog lumbered down the runway, slower, heavier, but unshakably steady. She felt the vibrations through the cockpit, a rhythm she had known since her first solo flight at 17. Her mind was already calculating the upcoming maneuvers, anticipating the turns, the climbs, the evasions. The others were fast, precise, but untested in the kind of low-level, ground-hugging chaos that her Warthog had mastered through decades of combat. Maxwell leaned to one of his fellow pilots. "Can she even keep up?" he whispered. His confidence wavered for the first time. Emily caught the tail of the comment in the corner of her senses, but she didn't look back. She had no need to. Every ounce of her focus was on the sky, on the terrain ahead, on the invisible line between life and death that pilots always danced along. The base tower crackled with an unexpected alert. "All units, emergency exercise initiated. Simulated ground strike scenario active. Low-level terrain engagement required. Priority to Warthog-class aircraft." Emily's pulse quickened, not with fear but anticipation. This was her domain. Her fingers tightened on the controls. The F-16, sleek and fast, would struggle in the canyon runs and rocky outcrops ahead. But she had flown these skis, maneuvered through every impossible gap, survived every simulated and real attack imaginable. Maxwell glanced at the Warthog again, his smirk fatting. "Guess the old girl might actually have a use," he muttered under his breath. A faint unease rippled through the F-16 squadron. Emily's calm, almost serene expression told them nothing, yet her eyes were scanning, calculating, preparing. The tail number, AF8001, reflected sunlight in a way that almost seemed to shimmer, and though none of the younger pilots knew it yet, it carried a legend. Emily taxied to the designated entry point. She could feel the heat of the engines, the vibrations through the control stick, the faint smell of hot metal and exhaust. She had been here before, on missions far less forgiving than a training exercise. But today, even though the exercise was simulated, every pilot on the ground knew that accidents happened when arrogance met complacency. The F-16 pilots thought they had the edge, thought their new jets and faster maneuvers made them untouchable. Emily didn't laugh. She didn't need to. As she lined up for takeoff, the canyon stretch ahead loomed like a jagged maw. The rocky cliffs, the narrow valleys, the unpredictable winds, they were unforgiving. But she thrived here. Every mission, every sortie, every brush with danger had trained her hands and instincts for exactly this. Her HUD blinked, sensors scanning the terrain, altitude, wind speed. She was ready. The F-16s flanked her, engines screaming, but the distance between them and the Warthog grew with every passing second. The tower's voice cut through the tension. All units maintain formation, Warthog leading, commence low-level engagement. Emily pushed forward. The Warthog responded immediately, wings shivering slightly under the sudden push. She banked left, hugging the terrain, her movements precise, confident. Behind her, the F-16s adjusted, their sleek frames faster but less stable at this altitude, less capable of the tight maneuvers required. She glanced at her tail number reflected on the wingtip panel. AF-8001. A symbol of battles won, of missions flown that nobody outside the classified files could ever understand. A gust of desert wind hit the formation, rattling the F-16s. Maxwell swore under his breath. Emily didn't flinch. She dove into a narrow canyon, her Warthog responding like an extension of her own body, every movement precise, every calculation correct. The younger pilots gasped, struggling to keep pace, their earlier mockery vanishing in the face of skill and experience that was undeniable. From the ground, a few instructors watched the formation, nodding silently. AF-8001, one muttered. She's the one. Emily's fingers danced over the controls, executing maneuvers the F-16 pilots couldn't anticipate, dodging simulated missile strikes and banking through impossible curves. Her voice over the comms remained calm, a soft hum in the storm of engines and wind. The F-16s were fast, yes, but the Warthog was steady, reliable, lethal. As the canyon narrowed and shadows stretched across the rocks, Emily's heart beat steady, her senses heightened. She knew the terrain, the aircraft, and herself better than anyone else in the airspace. Yet a flicker of tension passed through her mind, a subtle reminder that even legends are tested, and that every flight could end differently than expected. Behind her, the younger pilots whispered again, this time not with laughter but with disbelief. Maxwell's eyes were wide, fixated on the tail number gleaming in the sun. "No, it can't be," he muttered. He and the others had just begun to understand. This wasn't just a relic. This wasn't just an old plane. This was a living testament to history, skill, and a career forged in fire. Emily's calm voice over the headset cut through the murmurs. "Follow my lead. Stay sharp." And as the Warthog's engine screamed against the canyon walls, hugging impossible angles, the F-16 pilots realized they were about to witness something they hadn't expected, something that would challenge every assumption they had about speed, power, and legacy. The tail number glinted once more in the harsh desert sun, AF-8001, and for the first time that morning, the young pilots felt a shiver of respect and fear traced down their spines. Suspense. Who or what does that tail number belong to, and what secrets has it survived? The F-16 pilots couldn't believe their eyes as Emily's Warthog sliced through the morning sky. The canyon air roared past her cockpit, jagged cliffs scraping shadows across her instruments. Lieutenant Ryan Jet Maxwell's grin from the morning had vanished completely. "She's maneuvering like it's nothing," he muttered under his breath, sweat glinting on his forehead. The other pilots glanced at him, eyes wide, realizing their mockery had been premature. Their sleek F-16s, the pride of modern aerial warfare, seemed almost fragile compared to the raw power of Emily's battle-worn machine. Emily remained calm, each motion precise, every control input executed with instinctual perfection. Her HUD flickered with warnings as she threaded through a tight canyon corridor, but she barely noticed them. Years of experience and instinct, honed in real-life missions, made her movements second nature. The Warthog banked, and rose with an elegance that belied its age, almost mocking the modern jets struggling to follow. She glanced at the tail number, AF8001, its faded digits a beacon of legacy. To the untrained eye, it was just a relic, but to those who understood, it was a ghost from battles long ago, a testament to survival and unmatched skill. Maxwell's hands tightened on his controls. "How the hell?" he whispered, attempting a maneuver that would have given him the edge in any typical exercise. But the canyon narrowed, rocks loomed, and his F-16 speed, normally an advantage, became a liability. He swore quietly, fighting turbulence and wind gusts that seemed to obey Emily's every motion. She wasn't just flying. She was commanding the air, bending the terrain to her will. Behind her, the other F-16 pilots tried to form a protective formation, but it quickly fell apart. Their sleek machines, fast in open skis, couldn't replicate the close-quarters mastery of a Warthog flown by a pilot who had survived low-level sorties in hostile territory. Emily's calm voice crackled over the comms. "Keep your distance. Don't force it." Her tone was even, almost casual, but her words carried authority that made Maxwell swallow hard. Maxwell's eyes flicked to the tail number again, squinting at the faded digits. AF8001. His heart skipped. He had seen it before in briefings no young pilot was supposed to access. Files marked classified, details whispered only in high-level circles. That aircraft wasn't just a warplane, it was a legend. It had survived Desert Storm, covert Balkan missions, and classified operations so sensitive that even top brass seldom spoke of them openly. And here it was, piloted by someone he had underestimated completely. Emily banked sharply, hugging the canyon walls. Sensors beeped warnings, missiles, simulated fire, but she anticipated every threat before it even appeared. The F-16s floundered behind her, scrambling to avoid virtual collisions and terrain hazards. Maxwell's stomach churned. "This isn't possible," he muttered, as the Warthog weaved through a narrow rock corridor, its engines screaming in a symphony of power and endurance. "Focus on your instruments, not the pilot," Emily's voice came again, calm and unwavering. But it wasn't advice, it was a warning. She was leading them through a tactical gauntlet, forcing them to confront the limitations of their machines and their own inexperience. For years, these pilots had relied on speed and agility, thinking that technology alone was the defining factor in combat. Emily was proving, with every twist, dive, and climb, that skill, experience, and instinct still mattered more than anything else. The F-16 squadron leader, Captain Marcus Blaze Henderson, tried to regain control. "Maxwell, keep formation, don't let her get ahead." But it was too late. The Warthog surged, cutting through a narrow opening, and the F-16s had to scramble to avoid colliding with canyon walls. Emily's smooth, controlled movements made it look effortless. In reality, every maneuver was a life-or-death calculation. One misstep could mean disaster, but for her, disaster had been a constant companion in past missions, and she had learned to dance with it. As they approached a simulated target area, Emily's HUD highlighted multiple drones descending on the formation. She didn't hesitate. Countermeasures deployed with precision, flares bursting into the desert sky, decoys guiding missiles harmlessly away. Maxwell and the others were stunned, their F-16s forced into erratic, evasive maneuvers. The mockery from earlier that morning had vanished, replaced by awe and fear. They weren't just witnessing skill, they were witnessing history in motion. Maxwell's radio crackled with disbelief. She's doing it all herself, controlling the drones, the terrain, everything. His voice was tinged with panic, yet awe laced every word. Emily's calm tone returned over the comms. "Keep up if you can. Eyes forward, fingers steady." There was no arrogance in her voice, only control, and a quiet reminder that she had flown this path many times before. Then came the moment that silenced everyone. Emily executed a vertical dive, threading her Warthog through a canyon so narrow that the F-16s couldn't follow without risking collision. Her engines screamed against the canyon walls, flares igniting in perfect synchronization, and in that instant, Maxwell and the others realized something undeniable. AF-8001 wasn't just a plane, it was a weapon, a legend, and its pilot was untouchable. For the first time, the F-16 pilots looked at Emily not as a peer, but as something beyond. A ghost of combat expertise, the living embodiment of a history they had only read about in briefings and classified documents. Their mockery had been premature, naive, and now painfully evident. Emily leveled out beyond the canyon, her breathing steady, her eyes scanning the horizon. She allowed herself a brief glance at the younger pilots trailing behind. Some faces were pale, others wide-eyed, all silently acknowledging what she already knew. Respect could not be demanded, only earned, and she had just earned it in full. The tower crackled again, bringing them back to reality. All units report status, Warthog lead intact, formation integrity. Emily's fingers tapped a sequence into the comms, then she spoke, her voice calm even as adrenaline still coursed through her veins. Warthog intact, formation compromised but under control, proceeding with exercise. Maxwell's voice trembled over the comms. I underestimated you, completely. Emily's eyes flicked to her tail number again, the AF-8001 glinting in the morning sun. She didn't reply. Words were unnecessary. The tail number alone carried the weight of decades of missions, covert operations, and battles that had shaped not only her career but the very airspace they flew in. And somewhere in the silence that followed, Emily felt a familiar thrill. This was the test she had been waiting for, not a simulated exercise, but the subtle revelation of her skill, her history, and her unspoken legacy. The younger pilots would never forget it. Maxwell would never forget it, and neither would the F-16 squadron who had mocked her that morning. As the Warthog roared toward the next leg of the exercise, the canyon stretched out like an endless gauntlet. Emily's eyes narrowed slightly. The sky was vast, the terrain treacherous, and the danger ever-present. And in the back of her mind, a quiet whisper reminded her, it wasn't over yet. Suspense. The F-16 pilots had seen her skill, but they hadn't yet seen the full story behind AF-8001, and Emily knew that the real test was still ahead. The desert sky burned bright, the sun glaring off the tarmac and painting every jet with an almost blinding sheen. Emily Hawk Daniels had barely settled into the rhythm of the exercise when the alert blared across the comms. All units, engage simulated hostile drones. Low-altitude tactical engagement. Priority to Warthog-class aircraft. Her pulse sharpened, not from fear but anticipation. This was her domain. Years of combat had honed instincts so precise that calculations became muscle memory. She glanced at the tail number AF-8001, catching the sunlight, and felt the familiar weight of history pressing lightly against her shoulders. It wasn't just an aircraft. It was a legacy. A legend that had survived wars, covert missions, and close calls that nobody alive dared speak of. The F-16 pilots scrambled into position, engines screaming as they tried to maintain formation. Maxwell's hands were white on the control stick. Keep up, he barked, but even he knew it was impossible. The Warthog, slower in open air, had unmatched low-level maneuvering capabilities that their sleek jets simply could not replicate in the canyon terrain ahead. Emily banked sharply, weaving through the rugged cliffs like a ghost of the desert. The radar picked up multiple drone signatures closing in fast, simulated, yes, but no less dangerous if mismanaged. Flare dispensers popped in her HUD, and countermeasures were launched with a precision that made the younger pilot's jaws drop. The drones adjusted their trajectory, almost as if trying to anticipate her moves. And for the first time, some of the F-16 pilots realized that technology alone could not dictate the outcome of a battle. Skill and experience were everything. Maxwell swallowed hard. How is she doing this? He muttered over comms. Even Captain Marcus Blaze Henderson was forced to admit, through gritted teeth, that Emily's execution was flawless. Every dive, every roll, every banking maneuver was calculated, instinctual, perfect. She threaded her Warthog through the canyon with the kind of precision that could only come from someone who had flown these skis under the weight of real combat and survived. A sudden flare of simulated missile fire lit up the canyon walls, startling even the seasoned pilots. Emily's fingers moved with mechanical grace, guiding the Warthog through a hairpin turn, ejecting flares and ducking under rocky overhangs that would have crushed a miscalculated F-16. Behind her, the formation scattered, struggling to avoid collision. One drone clipped a canyon wall, disintegrating in a shower of simulated sparks. Emily's voice came over the comms, calm and unshakable. "Stay sharp. Follow my lead. Eyes forward, fingers steady." She was guiding them through a tactical gauntlet, forcing the F-16 pilots to confront their limitations. They had assumed that new tech, faster jets and flashy maneuvers gave them an edge. Emily was proving that instinct, experience, and an unbreakable bond with her aircraft still trumped any modern machine. Suddenly, a warning beep flashed across her HUD, another simulated threat, faster, more aggressive. Emily didn't hesitate. She executed a near-vertical dive, threading the Warthog through a narrow gap between two jagged cliffs. Wind roared past, turbines screamed, and the ground seemed to rush toward her at impossible speed. Yet every control input was flawless, every maneuver perfectly timed. Maxwell, in his F-16, barely avoided the canyon walls. For the first time, the younger pilots felt the weight of history settle over them. They weren't just flying against a skilled pilot, they were facing a living legend. AF-8001 wasn't just an aircraft. It was a symbol, a culmination of decades of missions that had been classified, erased from public memory, yet etched into the airspace itself. Every scar on the Warthog's fuselage, every dent in the metal told stories of survival, skill, and sacrifice. Emily's HUD flickered again, more drones converging, more simulated missiles locking onto her. She deployed flares in perfect sequence, banking hard left, then right, using the canyon walls to shield her trajectory. Behind her, the F-16 pilots struggled to keep up, some barely maintaining formation, others swearing as they fought turbulence and wind. Then came the moment that froze them all. Emily performed a sudden, sharp pull-up, climbing almost vertically, then arched into a dive so tight and calculated that the pursuing drones overshot their path, crashing harmlessly against simulated terrain. The younger pilots stared in disbelief. "No way," Maxwell whispered, voice barely audible over the roar of engines. The Warthog, slow and archaic in the open skis, had outmaneuvered every fast-moving jet and drone threat thrown its way. Emily leveled out beyond the canyon, heart steady, mind sharp. She allowed herself a brief glance at the pilots trailing behind, each one pale, shaken, silently acknowledging her skill. Respect had been earned, not demanded, and she had earned it in spades. The tail number glinted in the sunlight, a reminder of the missions it had survived, the lives it had protected, and the battles that had forged it into legend. The comms crackled. "All units report Warthog lead," the tower barked. Emily tapped a sequence into the system. Warthog intact, formation compromised but under control, proceeding with mission parameters. She didn't need to add anything else. The F-16 pilots already understood. Words couldn't convey decades of experience, the weight of classified missions, or the calm that comes only from having stared death in the face and lived to tell the tale. Maxwell's voice trembled. I underestimated you completely." Emily's eyes flicked to the horizon. There was no pride in her expression, no arrogance. Only control, focus, and the faint echo of memories from missions past. Every maneuver, every evasive roll, every dive through narrow terrain had been instinct born from years of necessity. And yet, a shadow passed over her features, a reminder that the past had not been kind, that the missions that forged her skill had cost her more than she would ever admit. She glanced again at the tail number, AF-8001. Every digit reflected sunlight, glinting almost like a beacon. It was more than a number, it was proof of survival, a symbol of perseverance, a warning to those who doubted. The younger pilots had mocked her in the morning, laughed at what they assumed was an outdated relic. Now they were silent, swallowed by awe and disbelief, realizing they were witnessing history in motion. Emily leveled out and guided the formation toward the next segment of the exercise, a simulated strike zone over rugged terrain. The F-16 pilots tried to mask their fear, but it was futile. They had glimpsed skill beyond their comprehension, instinct that couldn't be taught, and a bond with an aircraft that transcended the modern tools they relied on. And then came the final test. The exercise expanded into live-fire simulation with multiple threats converging from all directions. The Warthog, slow but indestructible, was now the center of attention. Emily felt her pulse steady, muscles coiling like springs. Every sensor was active, every system primed. The drones converged, missiles locked, and in that moment, every F-16 pilot understood one truth. AF-8001 didn't just fly. AF-8001 dominated. Maxwell's voice came again, trembling, almost reverent. She's not just a pilot, she's a force of nature. Emily didn't answer. Words weren't necessary. She had proven the impossible, survived the gauntlet, and demonstrated skill that modern jets, technology, or arrogance could never surpass. And yet, somewhere deep in her mind, she knew the mission was far from over. The real challenge, the one that would truly test both pilot and machine, was still ahead. The Warthog roared as Emily dove into another canyon, the desert cliffs blurring past. Behind her, the F-16 struggled to follow, shaken, awed, and silently acknowledging a new reality. This wasn't about speed or technology. It was about experience, courage, and the bond between pilot and plane. And as AF-8001 cut through the desert sky, gleaming in the sunlight, the younger pilots realized one undeniable truth: the legend of the Warthog, and the woman who commanded it, was far from over. Suspense. Emily's skill had been revealed, but the F-16 pilots had yet to understand the full history of AF-8001 and the dangers that still awaited in the next stage of the mission. The desert air shimmered in the late morning heat as Emily Hawk Daniels taxied her A-10 Warthog to a designated checkpoint beyond the rugged canyons. The F-16 pilots followed at a distance, engines whining in frustration and awe. What had started as mockery had transformed into a profound, almost unspoken respect. Maxwell's earlier confidence had crumbled, replaced with a cautious awe, while the others tried desperately to process what they had just witnessed. Emily shut down her engines, the Warthog rumbling like a sleeping giant. She climbed down from the cockpit, boots crunching on the sun-scorched tarmac. The younger pilots, hesitating at first, eventually gathered near the plane, drawn by a mixture of curiosity and reverence. Maxwell's jaw tightened as he stepped forward, his eyes locked on the faded tail number, AF-8001. "Captain Daniels," he began, his voice quieter than usual, almost reverent. I need to know, what's the story with this plane? That tail number." Emily didn't answer immediately. She stood tall, arms crossed, letting the desert wind whip through her hair. Her eyes scanned the horizon as if recalling decades of missions etched into memory. Finally she spoke, her voice calm but carrying the weight of decades. "AF-8001 is no ordinary Warthog. This aircraft has survived Desert Storm, covert Balkan operations, and multiple classified strikes that never made the headlines. It's been rebuilt more times than anyone can count. Every dent, every faded mark, every scar, it tells a story of survival, skill, and sacrifice." Maxwell's mouth went dry. We didn't know. We thought it was just old tech." Emily gave a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Old, perhaps, but it's more than capable. Faster jets can outrun it. Stealth fighters can outmaneuver it. But there's one thing you can't teach a machine and one thing technology can't replace: instinct, experience, and a pilot who's survived what most never see." The other pilots exchanged uneasy glances. A hush fell over the group. They had expected arrogance, perhaps bravado. Instead, they were met with quiet authority, the kind that comes only from surviving real combat, making split-second life-and-death decisions, and emerging on the other side. Maxwell's gaze drifted to the cockpit, running his fingers over the weathered fuselage. It's unbelievable. This plane survived all that. Emily nodded. More than that. It's carried crews through scenarios most pilots can't even imagine. Every maneuver you saw today, it wasn't luck. It was trained skill, instinct honed through missions that would have killed anyone else. And this Warthog, it's been a partner in every one of them. Captain Henderson, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. His eyes, usually hard and commanding, softened as he surveyed the plane. So all those files, all those classified briefings, it's all true. This aircraft, it's legendary. Emily's eyes met Henderson's, unwavering. It's not about legend. It's about survival, about making it through the mission, about ensuring that when people talk about heroism, someone actually lived to see the end of it. That tail number isn't just a number, it's proof. Proof that experience matters. Proof that courage matters. And proof that even an ancient Warthog can outperform the best modern jets if you know how to fly it. The younger pilots, still struggling to process this, began murmuring among themselves. Maxwell's gaze lingered on Emily, a mix of awe and guilt crossing his features. He had mocked her, assumed superiority, and now he realized how wrong he had been. The Warthog wasn't a relic. It was a weapon, yes, but it was also a teacher, a survivor, and a monument to the history of the skis. Emily stepped back, letting her presence dominate the scene. "I don't tell this story lightly," she said. "Most of these missions are classified for a reason. Most people don't know the price paid, but if you're here to learn, watch carefully. Respect the machine, respect the craft, and never underestimate the pilot." Maxwell swallowed, nodding slowly. We understand completely. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this." Emily's gaze shifted toward the desert canyons beyond. Today was just the warm-up. There's more to come, tests that will push your limits, and challenges that will remind you why we train like this. The Warthog isn't just about surviving the skis, it's about mastering them. And if you think you've seen everything, think again. There's a reason AF-8001 still flies when newer models are on the shelf. The squadron remained silent, absorbing her words. Some of the younger pilots' pride had been stripped away, replaced with humility. Maxwell clenched his jaw, finally meeting Emily's eyes. "We'll follow your lead," he said quietly. "No more doubts." Emily nodded, satisfied but not smug. "Good. Because the next exercise isn't about proving skill, it's about survival, adaptation, and trust. And when we take on the next scenario, I expect every pilot to understand one truth: arrogance kills. Preparation and instinct save lives." Henderson stepped closer, his commanding presence still evident. "Captain Daniels, we underestimated you, and we underestimated the Warthog. Consider this a lesson none of us will forget." Emily allowed herself a brief, almost imperceptible smirk. "Good. Lessons learned here will save lives in the real world. Remember that." The younger pilots looked at each other, faces pale but determined. What they had witnessed today had changed something deep within them. The Warthog, slow and seemingly outdated, had rewritten their assumptions about air combat. And Emily Daniels wasn't just a pilot. She was a force. A living embodiment of skill, courage, and history that refused to fade with time. Emily climbed back into the cockpit, running her hands over the controls as if greeting an old friend. The engines roared to life, louder and more commanding than ever. The F-16s prepared to follow her into the next leg of the exercise, but this time their laughter was gone. Mockery had been replaced by respect. Fear, awe, and curiosity filled their expressions. As Emily taxied down the runway, she glanced at AF-8001 one last time. Each dent, each faded streak of paint, each mark told a story the younger pilots would never fully understand, but one they would carry with them forever. She pushed the throttle forward, the Warthog surging ahead, its engines a testament to resilience and raw power. The canyon stretched before her once again, waiting. And though the exercise was simulated, the stakes felt real. For Emily, for the younger pilots, for the legacy behind AF-8001, the next challenge would test everything they thought they knew about skill, courage, and the thin line between triumph and disaster. The tail number glinted in the desert sun. AF-8001, a legend in motion, a teacher, a survivor, and a warning to anyone foolish enough to underestimate it or the pilot who commanded it. Suspense. The F-16 pilots now understood the legacy, but what awaits in the next, far more dangerous stage of the exercise? Emily knows the real test is just beginning. The desert sun had climbed higher, casting jagged shadows across the canyon walls. Emily Hawk Daniels taxied AF-8001 to the runway, the A-10 Warthog rumbling beneath her like a restless beast ready for battle. The F-16 pilots lined up behind her, engines screaming in a futile display of speed and modernity. They had witnessed her skill, her instinct, her mastery, but the real challenge was about to begin. "Captain Daniels," the tower crackled, voice sharp and urgent, "we have a live recon scenario. Fast movers cannot safely navigate the terrain. Only the Warthog is capable of reaching the objective and returning. Priority assignment, reconnaissance and tactical support. Exercise escalation level, red." Emily's pulse quickened, not from fear but anticipation. She had flown missions under far more dangerous circumstances, but the tension in the squadron was palpable. The younger pilots' earlier awe had transformed into anxiety. They were no longer following a legendary pilot, they were relying on her, and that reliance was a heavy weight. "Understood," Emily replied, her voice calm, steady, betraying nothing of the storm inside. "Prepare for tactical descent. I'll guide the formation through the canyon ingress. Follow protocol, maintain distance, and stay sharp." The F-16 pilots exchanged nervous glances. Maxwell's knuckles were white on the control stick. "She's going first," he muttered. "I thought the terrain was only an exercise. Now it's real." Emily taxied down the runway, the Warthog's engines roaring like a predator breaking its chains. She lifted off with practiced precision, each movement deliberate, controlled, confident. The F-16s followed, though their formation was hesitant, their speed advantage diminished by the narrow, rugged canyon ahead. The Warthog was slower, yes, but its stability, armor, and low-level maneuverability made it uniquely capable. The canyon stretched like a jagged maw, twisting and turning in unpredictable angles. Emily's HUD lit up with terrain warnings, and simulated enemy positions blinked red. She scanned the horizon with hawk-like precision, calculating every angle, every maneuver, every risk. Her fingers danced across the controls, guiding the Warthog through the first tight passage with near-perfect precision. Maxwell followed, struggling to keep pace. His F-16 dipped dangerously close to the canyon walls, swearing under his breath as turbulence threw the jet off balance. This isn't possible," he muttered. Emily didn't respond, but a glance over her shoulder revealed her composed expression, eyes sharp, every instinct tuned to survival and precision. The first simulated threat appeared, a squad of drones descending from above, programmed to intercept. Emily deployed flares and countermeasures instinctively, banking sharply to the left, weaving through jagged cliffs, the Warthog's engines screaming in protest. The F-16 pilots struggled to react in time, some swerving wildly, others forced to abort maneuvers entirely. "Stay back," Emily's voice cut over the comms, firm and authoritative. "Don't force it, observe and adapt." The squadron realized this was more than a lesson in maneuvering, it was a test of trust. The Warthog wasn't just surviving the terrain and threats, it was dictating the flow, forcing them to acknowledge their limitations. Maxwell's pride was gone, replaced with a mixture of fear and awe. She's untouchable," he whispered under his breath. Emily leveled the Warthog over a narrow ridge, the desert floor rushing below in a blur of brown and gold. Sensors lit up with multiple threats converging from all sides. Simulated missile strikes, hostile drones, and radar contacts signaling possible ambush points. She didn't hesitate. Every movement was instinct, every decision precise. The Warthog dipped, banked, rolled, and surged with a grace and efficiency that seemed impossible for its size. Behind her, the F-16 struggled to follow, each maneuver pushing the limits of their speed advantage. Maxwell's voice trembled over the comms. I can't keep up. I don't know how she's doing this." Emily didn't answer. Words were useless. She had taught the lesson. Instinct, experience, and trust in your aircraft mattered far more than raw speed or sleek design. The younger pilots were beginning to understand, but only just. The canyon narrowed further, cliffs rising ominously on either side. The drones executed a simulated strike pattern, converging from multiple vectors. Emily deployed countermeasures with perfect timing, flares exploding in dazzling bursts that illuminated the canyon walls. The Warthog weaved through the ambush, each maneuver calculated, measured, deadly in its precision. Maxwell nearly collided with a cliff face, swearing, heart-hammering, She's impossible." Emily's calm voice cut through the tension. "Focus, terrain first, threats second, react logically." She banked sharply, ducking under a simulated missile strike, then rolled into a canyon turn so tight the F-16s could barely follow. One clipped the canyon wall, forcing emergency evasive maneuvers. The squadron leader, Captain Henderson, clenched his teeth. He had seen skill before, but never like this. Every maneuver Emily executed was textbook perfection, and yet it carried a raw, dangerous energy born of combat experience. A F-8001 was not just a plane. It was a weapon, a partner, a teacher, and its pilot was a master. As they cleared the narrowest section of the canyon, Emily leveled out, scanning the next approach. The tail number gleamed in the sunlight, AF-8001, a living reminder of missions survived, lives protected, and skill forged in the fire of real combat. She glanced at Maxwell and the others trailing behind. Their faces were pale, eyes wide, awe and fear mingling in equal measure. "Next section," Emily's voice came over the comms, calm but commanding. "Maintain formation, stay alert. One mistake and the canyon doesn't forgive." The F-16 pilots exchanged glances, swallowed hard, and nodded. This was no longer an exercise. This was a test of survival, skill, and respect. The Warthog surged forward, engines screaming, flares ready, sensors scanning. Emily's mind was a machine of calculation and instinct. Every twist of the canyon, every ridge, every potential threat was already accounted for. And yet, a flicker of tension passed through her, a reminder that even legends like AF-8001 faced real danger, even in simulated environments. One misstep could turn the exercise into disaster. Behind her, the younger pilots struggled to follow, their pride shattered, replaced with humility and determination. They had mocked her in the morning, laughed at what they assumed was an outdated aircraft. Now they were following her lead, and realizing that every assumption they had made about skill, technology, and experience had been wrong. Emily banked sharply, entering a narrow canyon corridor where radar signals indicated a cluster of simulated drones closing in fast. She deployed countermeasures in a precise sequence, each flare bursting exactly as needed, guiding the drones into false paths. The F-16 scrambled to adjust, some too late. Maxwell's heart pounded in his chest. I don't understand. How?" Emily's eyes narrowed. She didn't explain. Action spoke louder than words. AF-8001 cut through the canyon, weaving and rolling, surviving threats that would have overwhelmed even the most advanced jets without the guidance of an experienced pilot. As the canyon opened into a wider valley, Emily leveled out, giving her squadron a moment to regroup. The F-16 pilots were shaken but alive. Maxwell's hands trembled as he released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. She's incredible," he muttered. Emily glanced back at the trailing jets, her calm expression hiding the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "This isn't about being incredible," she said quietly over the comms. "This is about survival, about understanding your limits, respecting the machine, and trusting instinct over arrogance. If you forget that lesson, you won't make it in the real world. The F-16 pilots remained silent, absorbing every word. They had seen her skill. They had felt their own limitations, and they were beginning to understand that the legend of AF-8001 was not just in the aircraft. It was in the pilot who commanded it. Emily pushed forward, engines roaring, flares and countermeasures primed. The next segment of the exercise loomed ahead. Tighter canyons, more drones, and a simulated threat pattern designed to push even the best pilots to their limits. And Emily knew that this was just the beginning. The real challenge, the one that would separate skill from legend, was still ahead. The tail number glinted in the harsh sunlight, AF-8001, a reminder that experience, courage, and instinct could outmatch speed, technology, or youth. The younger pilots had learned respect, but the true test of survival was just beginning. Suspense. Emily's skill had guided them through the first stage of the live exercise, but the next segment will test not just their flying, but their ability to survive under real tactical pressure. The canyon, the drones, and the limits of both pilot and plane are about to collide in a deadly dance. The canyon walls rose like jagged sentinels, the sun slicing long shadows across the desert floor. Emily Hawk Daniels tightened her grip on the Warthog's control stick, her eyes flicking across the HUD. The tail number AF-8001 gleamed in the glare of the midday sun, a testament to decades of missions, battles, and survival. Behind her, the F-16s followed, engines straining, formation faltering under the weight of terrain and instinct. Next section, high-risk tactical gauntlet, the tower crackled over comms. Enemy simulation escalating, drone clusters incoming from multiple vectors. Only Warthog-class aircraft can navigate safely. Exercise level critical. Emily exhaled, calm and focused. This was what she had trained for all her life, the chaotic dance of threats, terrain, and tactical precision. The F-16s relied on speed and sleek aerodynamics, but here, in the twisting canyon corridors, those advantages became liabilities. Maxwell and the others were about to discover that AF-8001 wasn't just fast or resilient. It was deadly in ways no simulator could teach. She surged forward, engines screaming, banking into the first tight canyon turn. The walls loomed ominously close, dust and small rocks kicked up by her turbines. Her HUD lit up with approaching drone clusters from multiple angles. Each move had to be calculated with lethal precision. One misjudged angle, one mistimed countermeasure, and the exercise could have ended disastrously. Emily deployed flares in a precise pattern, guiding the drones into false paths while the Warthog twisted and rolled with practiced fluidity. Behind her, the F-16 struggled to maintain formation. One pilot clipped a canyon wall with a near miss, swearing under his breath. "She's untouchable," Maxwell muttered, voice trembling as adrenaline pumped through him. The first cluster of drones dissolved harmlessly against Emily's calculated maneuvers, but there was no time to celebrate. Radar signals lit up with a second wave, faster, smarter, converging from multiple vectors. Emily's instincts sharpened. Every movement was a calculation: bank left, flare, roll, dive. Each maneuver she executed was a whisper of the countless missions she had survived in real combat, battles that no one outside classified files would ever understand. "Stay focused," she commanded over the comms. Her voice was calm, but every syllable carried authority. The F-16 pilots struggled to follow, their sleek jets agile but less forgiving in the narrow canyon. Each turn required precise speed modulation. Too fast, and the cliffs would tear them apart. Too slow, and they'd lose control under the simulated threat pressure. Maxwell's eyes were wide, sweat dripping down his temple. I can't, he faltered, realizing words couldn't capture the skill before him. Emily's calm precision was reshaping the way they understood air combat. It wasn't speed or stealth. It was instinct, experience, and mastery of your machine. A drone cluster descended from above, locking on in a complex simulated strike pattern. Emily's fingers danced across the controls, deploying countermeasures with impeccable timing. The drones detonated harmlessly, their paths diverted by flares and the Warthog's precise maneuvers. Behind her, the F-16s fought to adjust, some too slow, others too far off course. One jet nearly clipped the canyon wall in desperation. Emily didn't flinch. Her mind ran faster than the jets behind her, calculating trajectory, wind, and threat velocity with unmatched skill. Every maneuver was rehearsed in muscle memory from countless sorties, every instinct sharpened by real combat. AF-8001 roared through the canyon like a beast, heavy and powerful, yet impossibly agile. Maxwell's voice trembled. She's impossible. That's not humanly possible. Emily's calm tone cut across the chaos. Focus, observe, learn, don't force it, trust your instincts and your aircraft. The canyon narrowed further, cliffs rising like jagged walls. Emily executed a vertical dive, threading the Warthog through a gap so tight that the F-16s could barely navigate. Simulated missiles converged from 3 angles. She rolled sharply, flares erupting around her, guiding the threats away, and leveled out with fluid precision. Behind her, the F-16 scrambled, some recovering, some faltering. Maxwell's face was pale, adrenaline coursing, but he couldn't look away. How does she do this?" he whispered. The answer was simple, though he didn't yet fully comprehend it. Decades of experience, split-second instincts, and a bond with AF-8001 that went beyond pilot and plane. It was symbiosis. Emily banked into a canyon turned so tight that the Warthog's engine strained against the G-forces. Sensors beeped warnings, but she ignored them, trusting her instincts over any instrument. The simulated drones pursued, relentless, but each countermeasure she deployed was flawless. The young pilots could only watch in awe as she carved a path through the canyon, turning danger into choreography. The valley opened, revealing the final gauntlet. A series of sharp ridges, drone clusters converging from multiple vectors and narrow exits that tested every ounce of precision. Emily's eyes narrowed, scanning the terrain. She had flown this Warthog through worse, survived worse, but the stakes were still real. One mistake could have ended the exercise in catastrophe. She dove, banking hard, her engine screaming in defiance of gravity. Flares erupted in perfect timing, decoys misled the drones, and the Warthog surged through gaps invisible to the untrained eye. Behind her, the F-16 pilots struggled to adapt, some narrowly avoiding collisions. Maxwell's knuckles were white as he fought to maintain control. Emily's voice cut through the tension. Eyes sharp, predict, react, survive. Her calmness was contagious, though the challenge remained brutal. Each maneuver was a lesson, every roll a demonstration of why instinct and experience mattered more than any modern jet could teach. The Warthog leveled, clearing the final ridges. Emily allowed herself a brief glance behind. The F-16s were battered but intact, their respect unspoken but absolute. Maxwell's eyes were wide, awestruck, realizing for the first time the depth of skill required to master both terrain and threat simultaneously. Emily exhaled, a hint of a smile touching her lips. She had navigated the gauntlet flawlessly, proving once again that AF-8001 was more than a plane, it was a legend in motion. Behind her, the younger pilots struggled to reconcile what they had witnessed. The difference between speed and skill, arrogance and experience, modern tech and true mastery. The tail number glinted in the sunlight, AF-8001. A silent warning, a testament, a symbol of survival and mastery. Emily's presence had reshaped the perception of the young pilots. No longer was she just a pilot, she was a force, a teacher, and a living legend. But even as she guided the formation out of the canyon, Emily's mind raced. The exercise was over for now, but the real challenges weren't simulations. Dangers in combat rarely waited for perfect conditions, and somewhere deep inside, she knew that the next test would demand more than skill. It would demand courage, decision, and perhaps a confrontation with the limits of both pilot and machine. The desert heat was oppressive, shimmering waves rising from the canyon floor as Emily Hawk Daniels adjusted AF-8001's throttle. The gauntlet had tested their limits, but the real challenge was about to begin. The tower crackled with urgency. "All units prepare for high-threat engagement," the voice ordered. Enemy drones converging from multiple vectors, terrain extremely hostile, red-level exercise escalation. Only Warthog-class aircraft can navigate the corridor safely. Emily's pulse quickened, not from fear but anticipation. She had faced worse in real combat, but the F-16 pilots behind her were out of their depth. Maxwell's face was pale, knuckles tight on his controls. They had seen her skill, but now the desert itself would test them. "Stay close. Follow my lead. Trust your aircraft," Emily said over comms, voice steady, commanding. She banked sharply into the first canyon, engines roaring, flares ready. AF-8001 responded like a living creature, twisting and rolling through the narrow corridor with surgical precision. The first wave of simulated enemy drones appeared, converging rapidly from above and below. Emily's HUD lit up, red warning signals flashing across the screen. Instinct took over: bank left, flare, dive, roll. The drones reacted, but she was always one step ahead. Each maneuver was calculated, perfected through years of combat experience. Behind her, the F-16 struggled to match her. One clipped the canyon wall, forcing an emergency evasive maneuver. Maxwell swore under his breath, heart hammering, realizing that skill and experience could not be faked. Emily's voice came again, firm: "Predict, react, survive. Eyes forward." The canyon narrowed. Drones descended in complex attack patterns, converging from multiple angles. Emily dove through a tight gap, flares erupting in perfect timing, decoys misleading threats. The Warthog twisted and rolled, every move a testament to precision and instinct. The F-16 pilots were scrambling, some barely maintaining formation. Maxwell's voice trembled. I don't understand. How does she?" Emily didn't answer. Words were unnecessary. Actions spoke louder. AF-8001 cut through the canyon like a predator, turning chaos into calculated choreography. Every maneuver demonstrated why the Warthog and its pilot were legends. The second wave hit harder. Radar signals indicated a high-speed swarm descending from multiple directions. Emily's eyes narrowed, calculations running faster than thought. She banked sharply, deploying countermeasures with flawless timing, weaving through the simulated ambush with deadly efficiency. Behind her, the F-16 pilots struggled. Their sleek jets, fast in open air, were liabilities here, vulnerable to the terrain and the precision of a pilot who had survived real combat. Maxwell's knuckles turned white. "She's untouchable. I can't believe this." Emily's calm voice echoed, "Focus, react, learn." The Warthog twisted through a canyon that seemed impossibly narrow, the walls scraping past, warning signals flashing. Drones converged, missiles locked on, yet she executed every move with mechanical perfection. AF-8001 responded like a living partner, surviving threats that would have destroyed any other aircraft. Behind her, the younger pilots were in shock. Pride had turned to fear, mockery to awe. Each maneuver Emily executed was a lesson they would never forget. Speed and technology could not replace experience, instinct, and skill. The canyon opened into a narrow valley. Emily's eyes scanned every angle: cliffs, ridges, converging drones. She executed a vertical dive, threading the Warthog through a gap invisible to untrained eyes, deploying flares to mislead the attackers. The drones detonated harmlessly, and the F-16 scrambled to adjust, some too late. Maxwell's face was pale, jaw tight. "She's impossible. That's humanly impossible." Emily leveled out, engines screaming, scanning for the next threat. Her mind ran faster than the jets behind her, every move calculated instinctively. The Warthog surged, banked, rolled, survived. The F-16s followed or tried to, struggling against terrain, wind, and threat pressure. Then came the final segment, a complex simulated ambush designed to push every pilot to the edge. Drones converged from multiple vectors, missile simulations locked in, terrain obstacles almost impassable. Emily didn't hesitate. She dove, banked, rolled, deploying flares and decoys in perfect synchronization. Every maneuver was fluid, precise, deadly. Behind her, Maxwell's F-16 nearly collided with the canyon wall in desperation. How is she still alive?" he muttered. Emily's voice cut through. "Focus, trust your aircraft, respect the machine." AF-8001 twisted through the ambush like a ghost, weaving between threats, climbing, diving, banking with unmatched precision. Every move demonstrated skill born from real combat, experience, courage, and instinct. The F-16 pilots watched in awe and fear, realizing that they had underestimated both the pilot and the plane. The final stretch approached, a narrow corridor with simulated missiles converging from all sides. Emily leveled the Warthog, calculating every angle. She deployed countermeasures with perfect timing, guiding threats harmlessly away, then surged forward, engines screaming. The F-16 struggled to follow, some barely recovering. Maxwell's hands shook on the controls. She's a force of nature. Emily didn't respond. She had completed the gauntlet, survived the ambush, and proven the Warthog's unmatched capability. But she knew the final test wasn't over. Survival had been achieved, but mastery demanded more: courage, decision-making, and trust under pressure. She leveled out over the desert, allowing herself a brief glance behind. The F-16 pilots were battered, shaken, their earlier arrogance stripped away. Respect and fear reigned now. Maxwell's jaw tightened, eyes wide with realization. AF-8001 wasn't just a relic. It was a legend, and Emily Daniels was its living embodiment. The tail number glinted in the sunlight. AF-8001. A silent reminder of survival, skill, and the legacy of missions too dangerous to speak of. Emily guided the formation back toward the checkpoint, engines roaring, flares and countermeasures ready. "Lesson 1, Emily said quietly over comms. "Survival depends on skill, instinct, and respect. Never forget it." The younger pilots nodded, pale but alive, understanding for the first time the gap between modern jets and a pilot who had mastered both machine and environment. Emily's eyes scanned the horizon. The ambush was complete. The gauntlet survived. But the real test, the one that would push both plane and pilot beyond any simulated threat, was still ahead. And in her mind, she knew that the ultimate reckoning would demand everything: skill, courage, experience, and instinct. The desert horizon burned gold as Emily Hawk Daniels climbed AF-8001 into position. The final stage of the exercise loomed, a high-threat simulated target deep in canyon terrain, guarded by waves of enemy drones, unpredictable ridges, and tactical obstacles designed to test every ounce of skill a pilot could muster. The F-16 pilots followed, engines screaming, but behind them lay a mixture of fear, awe, and reluctant respect. "Red level target engagement," the tower announced. "All units proceed with caution. Maximum threat level. Only Warthog-class aircraft capable of navigating terrain successfully." Emily's pulse sharpened, not from fear but anticipation. Years of experience had trained her for this, missions in hostile skies where hesitation meant death. AF-8001 wasn't just her plane. It was an extension of her instincts, every rivet and dent a story of survival. Behind her, Maxwell's jaw was tight, eyes wide, the weight of past mockery evaporated in the face of what he was about to witness. "Stay sharp, observe, follow my lead," Emily's voice cut through the comms. Calm, authoritative, unyielding. The F-16 pilots nodded, silent but attentive. The canyon ahead twisted sharply, walls rising like jagged monoliths. The radar lit up with multiple threat vectors: fast drones descending from above, missile simulations locking in, narrow passes that would punish the slightest miscalculation. Emily banked sharply into the first turn, engines screaming, flares ready, AF-8001 responding like a living predator. The first wave of drones descended in complex patterns. Emily Dove rolled and weaved with the kind of precision that could only come from combat-honed instinct. Each maneuver calculated, instinctual, fluid. The Warthog responded instantly, twisting through impossible angles, dodging simulated strikes that would have overwhelmed any other aircraft. Behind her, the F-16 struggled, speed now a liability in the narrow canyon. Maxwell's face was pale, knuckles white. She's untouchable, he whispered, realizing that what they had mocked in the morning was now undeniable fact. Emily's eyes flicked over the HUD, then the terrain. The drones converged from multiple angles, programmed to challenge even the most skilled pilot. She deployed countermeasures in perfect timing, flares exploding in bursts of light that illuminated the jagged cliffs. Each move guided the drones into traps of her making, neutralizing threats before they could react. "Keep focus," Emily's calm command echoed. "Predict, react, survive." The canyon narrowed further. Radar signals warned of simulated missile strikes converging from 3 vectors. Emily executed a vertical dive, threading AF-8001 through a gap so tight that the F-16s could barely maintain formation. Flare bursts misled the drones, while her Warthog twisted, rolled, and surged with unmatched precision. Maxwell swallowed hard. How is she still alive? His voice trembled as he fought to follow, every instinct screaming that survival here required far more than raw speed or technology. Emily leveled the Warthog, engine screaming, scanning for the final approach. The target zone was visible ahead, a narrow canyon corridor with ridges on either side, hostile drone clusters converging rapidly. This was the ultimate test. She had survived countless battles, but this moment demanded perfection, instinct, and trust in AF-8001 like never before. She dove into the canyon, flares erupting in a perfect pattern, decoys misleading the drones, every maneuver fluid and deadly. The F-16 pilots were forced to watch, helpless in comparison, struggling to maintain formation. Maxwell's face was pale, eyes wide, as awe and fear collided. The final drone cluster descended, missiles locking on from multiple directions. Emily banked sharply, flares detonating, misdirecting every threat. AF-8001 twisted through the ambush, executing maneuvers so precise that even the canyon walls seemed to part in deference. Behind her, the younger pilots barely kept up. One clipped a ridge with a near miss, another's jet wobbled under turbulence. Maxwell realized the truth in a heartbeat. Skill, instinct, and experience mattered more than speed, stealth, or modern tech. The Warthog wasn't just surviving, it was dominating. Emily leveled out over the final ridge, flares still bursting, drones neutralized. The target zone loomed, a simulated objective they had to secure. She dove into the corridor, executing one last vertical maneuver, threading through an impossible angle, and leveled out perfectly at the apex of the canyon. The F-16 pilots followed, battered but intact, their previous arrogance stripped away. Maxwell exhaled, voice trembling. She's a force of nature. That's impossible." Emily didn't respond. She allowed herself a brief glance at AF-8001, every scar and dent reflecting the sun like a badge of history. The plane had survived impossible odds before, and today it had done so again. Captain Henderson, usually stoic, finally broke the silence. "I've never seen anything like it. That Warthog, that pilot, unbelievable." Emily's gaze swept over the formation. "This isn't about legend, it's about survival, instinct, skill. Respect your aircraft, respect your environment, and never underestimate experience over technology." The F-16 pilots, including Maxwell, nodded, pale and humbled. They had mocked her in the morning, laughed at what they assumed was an outdated relic. Now they understood. AF-8001 wasn't just a plane. It was a teacher, a survivor, a monument to skill honed in real combat. And Emily Daniels wasn't just a pilot. She was the embodiment of that legend. She guided the formation out of the canyon, engines screaming triumphantly. Behind her, the younger pilots processed what they had just witnessed. The lessons were seared into memory. Arrogance was deadly. Skill, instinct, and experience were everything. Maxwell swallowed hard, finally speaking with reverence. "Captain Daniels, I owe you an apology. And respect. I didn't understand before, now I do." Emily allowed herself a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Good, learn it well. It may save your life someday." The tail number glinted in the sunlight. AF-8001. More than a plane, more than a relic, it was a legend alive in motion. And today, that legend had been proven. The Warthog and its pilot had rewritten what everyone thought possible, leaving no room for doubt. Emily leveled the Warthog, scanning the horizon one last time. The exercise was over, but the lessons were eternal. For the F-16 pilots, for Maxwell, for Captain Henderson, the memory of AF-8001 and the pilot who commanded it would never fade. In the heat of the desert under the blazing sun, AF-8001 roared triumphantly, a living monument to survival, skill, and legacy. Emily Daniels, boots firm on the pedals, hands steady on the controls, had cemented her legend. And as the younger pilots followed, humbled and awed, one thought lingered in their minds, unspoken but undeniable. The Warthog may have been ancient, but its tail number and its pilot were immortal.